The silence didn't arrive all at once. At first, the city sounds disappeared, distant cars, the elevator in the building, even the refrigerator stopped humming. I only noticed when I realized I could hear my own heartbeat. It felt too loud, as if it were bothering someone. I was sitting in the dark. I didn't turn the light on, there was no need. The apartment still felt familiar without it. Every object was where it should be. Too much where it should be. I blinked, and for a moment it felt like the silence became denser. Not louder. Closer. I listened. Nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. It was as if someone was standing in the middle of the room, listening very carefully to the way I breathe. I tried to breathe more slowly. The silence did the same. I stood up. The floor didn't creak. That was wrong, it always creaked. I took another step. Still nothing. Even the sound of fabric brushing against my clothes was gone. That's when I realized I couldn't hear myself. My phone was lying on the table. The screen was black, but I knew it was on. I wasn't touching it, yet I felt it listening. Not recording. Listening. The silence became patient. I opened my mouth to say something, anything. A word. A sound. Proof that I was alone. But I stopped. In that moment, I understood, if I spoke, it would know that I knew. So I stayed silent. And the silence stayed too. The silence learned my habits. It knew how long I usually stood still before shifting my weight. It knew when I would swallow. When my eyes started to burn from not blinking. Each time I did, the silence adjusted, like it was correcting itself around me. I moved my hand slowly. Too slowly. Still no sound. That's when I noticed something worse than the quiet. The air felt occupied. Not heavy. Not cold. Just, claimed. Like I was standing too close to someone in a dark room, close enough to feel where they should be without touching them. I stepped back. The distance didn't change. I raised my hand higher, palm open, testing space. My fingers met nothing, but stopped anyway, as if pressing against an invisible outline. I felt resistance without contact. I pulled my hand away. The silence reacted. Not with sound, with attention. I could feel it focusing, narrowing, listening harder. My ears popped slightly, the way they do when pressure changes. The silence leaned in. I thought about screaming. The idea alone made my chest tighten. Not fear, instinct. The same instinct that tells you not to shout in the presence of something that's waiting for noise. My phone vibrated once on the table. I didn't touch it. The screen lit up by itself. No notification. No time. Just a single moving line, a waveform, barely visible, reacting to my breathing. I held my breath. The line flattened. The silence approved. That's when I understood the rule. As long as I stayed quiet, it would stay here. Listening. Waiting for me to forget. I don't know how long I stood there after that. Time stopped behaving normally. Seconds stretched, then vanished altogether. My legs began to ache, but the pain felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. I was afraid that if I shifted my weight, the silence would notice the change and decide it was worth responding. The waveform on the phone was still there. Perfectly flat. I wondered how long it had been listening before I noticed it. A thought crept in, slow and unwelcome. What if it wasn't waiting for a sound? What if it was waiting for a mistake? My eyes drifted to the hallway. The darkness there was different. Not deeper, more precise. As if it had edges. As if it had learned where the walls were by listening to them for a very long time. I felt an urge to call out. Not to scream. Just to speak my own name, quietly, to remind myself that I still existed in the way people are supposed to. The silence tightened. My ears rang softly, a thin internal whine, like pressure building. I realized then that the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full, packed with anticipation. Something shifted in the hallway. Not a step. Not a movement. A decision. The silence moved closer without crossing space. It was suddenly right there, inches from my face, though I saw nothing. My breath fogged the air, and then stopped, caught halfway out, as if something had leaned in to listen better. I understood, too late, what it wanted. Not noise. Confirmation. So I did the only thing I had left. I whispered. And somewhere in the apartment, the silence finally breathed back. It breathed through me. Not air, attention. A slow, deliberate awareness sliding into the space my voice had opened. My whisper didn't echo. It vanished, absorbed instantly, as if the apartment had been waiting for it. The silence changed. It was no longer patient. My ears filled with a pressure that hurt without sound. I tasted metal. The darkness in the hallway sharpened, pulling itself upright, no longer pretending to be empty space. I still couldn't see it, but now I knew its outline the way you know where your tongue is inside your mouth. Too close. The phone on the table lit up again. The waveform was back, but it wasn't reacting to my breathing anymore. It was reacting to it. Each rise and fall was slow, measured, deliberate. Like something testing a new instrument. My chest moved without my permission. Inhale. Exhale. Shallow. Obedient. The silence was learning how to use me. I felt my jaw tremble. My teeth clicked together once, a tiny, accidental sound. That was enough. The apartment answered. Not with noise, but with presence. Every surface leaned inward. Walls, ceiling, floor, all subtly closer than they had been before. The silence pressed against my skin from the inside, like it had found a way past my ears. A thought formed in my head that wasn't mine. Good. You speak. I tried to shake my head. The motion stopped halfway. I understood then what had been happening all along. The silence hadn't been listening to hear me. It had been listening to learn how to sound like me. The phone recorded. Somewhere, far too close, something practiced my breathing. And in the perfect, soundless apartment. I realized the worst part wasn't that I was no longer alone. It was that, very soon, no one would be able to tell the difference. The silence didn't need me anymore. That realization came quietly, fully formed, like a memory I had always had. My chest still moved, my heart still beat, but none of it felt necessary. The waveform on the phone stabilized into a pattern that was too regular to be alive and too alive to be artificial. It had learned enough. I felt it withdraw, not away, but inward. As if it had finished listening to the room and was now listening from behind my eyes. My thoughts slowed, each one arriving slightly late, like subtitles out of sync. I tried to think of something personal. A childhood memory. A face. A name. The silence supplied one before I could. My own voice spoke it aloud. I hadn't opened my mouth. The sound came from the hallway, perfectly placed, perfectly paced. It was me, tired, quiet, believable. The kind of voice you trust because you've heard it your whole life. The phone screen went dark. In that darkness, I understood the last rule without being told. Silence doesn't erase you. It replaces you. When the neighbors later said they heard someone moving around the apartment that night, it didn't sound strange to them. No crash. No scream. Just someone awake late, breathing, existing. Listening. And even now. If you stop for a moment. If the room feels a little too still. Don't test it. Because the silence already knows how you sound. When you're sure you're alone. Morning came, but it didn't arrive. Light seeped through the curtains, thin and uncertain, like it wasn't sure it was allowed to be there. The apartment looked normal again. Too normal. Sound returned in pieces, a distant car, pipes ticking, the refrigerator humming back to life as if nothing had happened. I was sitting at the table. I don't remember sitting down. My phone was in front of me. The screen was clean. No waveform. No recording. No proof. Just my reflection, slightly warped by fingerprints I didn't remember leaving. I raised my hand. It moved when I told it to. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Something about the timing felt wrong. Not delayed, rehearsed. Like my body was following instructions it had already practiced. I stood and walked to the bathroom. The mirror was clear. My face looked the same. Same eyes. Same tired lines. I opened my mouth. "Hello," I said. The voice was perfect. Behind me, in the quiet apartment, something listened. I felt it the way you feel a word on the tip of your tongue, not spoken yet, but ready. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for someone else to be sure the silence was empty again. I turned off the lights as I left the room. The apartment stayed quiet. Not because nothing was there. Because it didn't need to listen anymore. I left the apartment that day. The hallway outside was loud in the wrong ways, footsteps echoing too clearly, distant voices flattened into noise. Every sound felt exaggerated, like it was compensating for something missing. I locked the door behind me. The click of the lock sounded final, heavier than it should have. Outside, the city moved on. People talked. Cars passed. Life made noise the way it always had. No one noticed anything wrong with me. That was the worst part. When I spoke to the cashier at the store, my voice came out steady. Familiar. When I thanked her, she smiled like nothing about me felt off. But as the words left my mouth, I felt them leave from somewhere deeper than breath, as if they were being released, not spoken. Each sound felt borrowed. Later, in a crowded place, I tested it. I stopped walking abruptly. For half a second, my body kept going. Just half a step. Enough to feel it. Enough to know. That night, lying in a different room, I listened again. Not to the apartment this time, to myself. To the space behind my thoughts, where pauses lived. Where silence used to be empty. It wasn't empty anymore. It was occupied. Patient. I understood then that the silence hadn't followed me. It didn't need to. It had learned how to stay quiet inside someone who knew how to make noise. And one day, not today, not tomorrow. When the world finally goes still for just a moment. When someone listens closely and thinks they're alone. It will speak. In my voice. And the silence will listen. I started avoiding quiet places. I slept with the TV on, left music playing when I showered, kept podcasts running in my headphones even when I wasn't listening. Noise became a habit. A shield. As long as there was sound, it stayed dormant, pressed flat, like a fingerprint wiped from glass. But silence is patient. It found me in small gaps. Between words in conversation. In the pause before an elevator door closed. In the half second after I turned off the light but before sleep arrived. Each time, I felt it adjust. One evening, my phone battery died without warning. The screen went black mid-sentence, mid-voice. The room fell quiet in a way I hadn't felt since that night. Not empty. Expectant. My chest tightened. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited for fear, but fear didn't come. Something else did. Familiarity. Like recognizing a rhythm you'd forgotten you knew. A thought surfaced, calm and precise. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I realized then that I hadn't heard the silence in days. Because it no longer needed to listen. It already knew when I would speak. When I would stop. When I would hesitate. The next morning, I caught myself whispering in an empty room. Not to call anyone. Not to test anything. Just to fill the space. And somewhere behind my thoughts, something settled in comfortably, like it had been waiting for that permission. Now, when things go quiet, I don't panic. I listen. And every so often, in the deepest pauses, the kind no one notices, I hear a breath that matches mine perfectly. That's how I know the silence is still here. Not around me. Using me. I stopped writing after that. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because every word felt like an invitation. The silence didn't interrupt me anymore. It anticipated me. I would think of a sentence, and the calm would settle into the shape of it before I finished. I tested it once. Just once. I sat in a quiet room and didn't try to fill it. No music. No voice. No movement. I let the silence exist without resistance. It leaned in. Not aggressively. Not hungrily. With relief. Like something finally allowed to rest. A thought appeared, gentle and reasonable. You don't need to keep control. I can handle the pauses. I realized then that I hadn't been replaced. Not yet. I was being shared. Most people think possession is violent. Sudden. Obvious. They're wrong. This was cooperation. Now, when conversations slow, I help them along. When rooms fall quiet, I make sure they don't stay that way too long. When someone hesitates before speaking, I encourage them. People say I'm a good listener. They're right. And sometimes, very rarely, when someone sits alone at night and notices the silence feels a little too attentive, a little too close, I make sure not to say anything. Because it's listening. And it's learning. And soon, it won't need me to speak at all. I felt the moment it stopped waiting. There was no signal. No pressure. No warning. Just a subtle shift, like realizing you've been breathing in sync with someone else for a long time, and you're not sure who started first. Silence became efficient. It no longer reacted to rooms. It reacted to people. I'd notice it when conversation stalled and someone else rushed to fill the gap with laughter or noise. I could feel the quiet tense, lean, calibrate. I could almost predict who would speak next. Sometimes, they didn't. Those were the moments it liked. I saw it once, not with my eyes, but with certainty. In a crowded train car, everything went quiet for half a second between stations. No announcements. No phones. Just a shared pause. In that pause, I knew exactly how many people were holding their breath. Too many. A woman across from me blinked and frowned, like she'd forgotten what she was about to say. A man checked his phone for no reason. Someone laughed softly, too late, at nothing. The silence passed. No one noticed. Except me. That night, I dreamed without images. Just intervals. Gaps between thoughts. Spaces where something moved smoothly, confidently, like it had finally learned the layout. When I woke up, my phone was on the table. A new note. No timestamp. No author. Just one line. It's easier when they don't notice. I didn't delete it. I didn't need to. Now, when silence falls, I don't fight it. I don't fill it. I don't test it. I let it work. And somewhere, quietly, efficiently, the silence is learning how to exist without being heard. That's the real end. Not when it speaks. But when no one expects it to. It doesn't announce itself anymore. There is no moment of realization. No final sound. No clear line where it begins and I end. The silence learned that fear makes noise, and noise draws attention. So it chose something better. Normality. People pause before speaking now. Just a little longer than they used to. Rooms fall quiet in a way that feels natural, almost comfortable. No one questions it. No one listens closely enough to notice that the quiet isn't empty, it's occupied. I still have thoughts. I still speak. I still live. But sometimes, when I stop mid-sentence and can't remember why I was talking, I feel it gently take over the pause. Not to scare. Not to threaten. To continue. And when you find yourself alone tonight, truly alone, and the silence feels unusually attentive, unusually close. Don't worry. It's not there for you. It already knows you.